The FN 509 Midsize Tactical is finally out. Tabletop review and field strip coming up next. I have this in for a magazine article. When that article publishes, I will put a link as a pinned comment as to where to pick that up. So sorry guys, you're not going to get the full details that go into that magazine. That's just the way the professionalism works in this industry. Onto the gun. Notice the box is a little bit bigger, a little bit different than the standard 509 that we showed you previously. And inside you get one of these gun wallet type setups that is also bigger. Opening up this wallet, we've got the pistol, which of course came in the bag. I've already been doing stuff with it. With a 15 round magazine that is flush fit and a 24 round magazine for all the fun. That's quite beefy. The bag has plenty of spots for more mags and some padding on this side. On the top side, in addition to the padding, we've got a zippered pouch in which is your manual for fitting the optics, including a guide to which pattern of optics cut fits which plate. And unlike other companies, FN includes the pack of them, which is kind of nice. You've got everything you need here, different screw lengths, the different plates, different backsides to it, our user manual, and of course our federally mandated lock, but this time FN blue and branded, which is a nice extra touch, considering these are not inexpensive firearms. Next, we'll take a look at the manual and see how well FN wants you to understand this gun. And speaking of manuals, this piece was in this bag. Looks like it's meant to hold something. The same bag that the pistol came in. No mention of it in the manual, not sure what it's supposed to do. I'm betting some of you FN guys already know. If you do, share it with us. I'm curious what that thing's for. So going through this manual, it is your standard 4-color with illustrations. Illustrations are great because they make it easier to emphasize whatever they're talking about versus a photo. So that's nicely done. I did note in here it warns against dry firing. It says that occasional dry fire or dry fire for disassembly is fine, but if you're going to do a lot of it, to use a snap cap. Otherwise you risk damaging the firing pin. Not many 9mm pistols out there these days that advise that. It also talks about multiple back straps, interchangeable back straps, which my gun did not come with. Now that may just be a media thing that happens. I'm used to that when I get these samples early. I've had this one for a couple months now, even prior to filming. Sometimes that's just the way it is when we get early samples. Do want to point out that it does have the plate and screw guide also in the manual in case you lose that other sheet. And then one part that I thought was very thoughtfully done is lubrication points. It's got quite a few more of them than I'm used to seeing. Just because they're more detailed, not that the gun needs more lubrication. And if you're curious about the difference between this gun and others for specs, you can pause and hopefully read there. And there's comparing it to the compact MRD, the two MRDs, which is kind of the previous model. Alright, enough of that talk, let's look at the gun. So I always start things off by showing clear, and we've got a nice bright orange follower in this magazine. You can see that we're clear inside. Magazine release, actually I should have left that out. Gives a little bit of a kick. Little bump. Which is better than simply releasing. That's what I appreciate. Witness windows on these magazines are on the back and by the number, which is another nice plus. Looking very well thought out. On these 509s, if you're new to the platform, completely ambidextrous controls, which I appreciate. It was probably done initially for department, government contract request type things, so that they could just order one gun and have it work for everybody. As someone who trains and shoots a lot, I appreciate it because it lets me practice strong side and other strong side, to follow a term used by Kit Badger. And as you can see there, the magazine release, or the slide release and lock works on the right side of this gun. This is not one of those where the torque across, because really the catching is happening over here, bends the bar. So what makes the Midsize Tactical different? It's probably what you've been waiting forever to hear. Well, we've got optics ready suppressor height sights, and a threaded barrel. Those are the visually obvious things. Everything else looks the same, and one of the other changes that was made was to the trigger. Now, when Tia and I reviewed the standard 509, we found the trigger to be excellent once we got on the range. Dry fire, it's maybe not that impressive, but on the range was a good trigger. This trigger is even better. It is hinged. We come back to a wall, a little bit of creep, crisp break, reset, decent length, and crisp, audible tactile, and a nice break again. It's not the most tactile of resets, but it is a good, predictable trigger that I think once it gets broken in, there's a little bit of hang up in there, it's going to make for just as good of predictable shots as the other one did. Let's get in with our standard look around the gun in case you are new to the 509 platform. Right off the bat, 1, 2, 3, 4 rail slots, plenty for a basically 4.5 inch barreled 9mm with 15 rounds. We have a little bit of beveling up front here to make insertion in the holster easier, although keep in mind with tall sights and an extra barrel, that's going to be something to take into consideration. Nice contours here. The slide serrations grip, they don't look like much. They're not super aggressive, but they work. Flat top, we do have a rib up top where typically you'd see anti-glare serrations or something like that. However, I have yet to really catch glare from there on any pistol aside from my chrome-plated Bred 92 clone. So the fact that there's no serrations is okay with me. We saw the trigger. For my XXL hands, controls are easily within reach. I'm probably going to be using the magazine release from the other side. That's just a preference I have versus shifting my grip. No texture on the front of the trigger guard. The trigger guard undercut is slight. We've got some good texturing here. I hope as the light rolls over it you can see the structure there. That's going to help resist both side to side and vertical movement, and vertical movement is what you want most. We've got slightly more aggressive, deeper texturing here where you're going to be pressing your palm in, and then where fingers rest or slide, the more modern laser stippling. It's kind of an interesting blend. Coming down the bottom, we do not have any type of real magwell, but when you've got a single stack or double stack single feed, the magazine is your inverse magwell, so get over it. I do like that the tail of the backstrap hangs down a little more. I use that to index as I'm inserting a mag and then roll in. As far as size wise, this is one of those where I can get 3 fingers on it with the mag in. Without, I end up about 2.5 fingers on. That's just what happens to me on 15 round 9mm guns. Slide to frame fit. We've got quite a bit of play. Can roll all over the place. That amount of play typically aids in reliability. As far as impacting accuracy, the worst thing it means is that your sights are going to be angled or tilted like 1/1000th of a degree different than they were shot to shot, but the gun moves so much in your hand it's not something you notice. Don't believe me? Wait until we group this on the range and you'll see there. Here are our sights. We've got a nice attention grabbing white circled and tritium front sight and subdued sight in the back, and this interesting ear system that is on this plate. Now these ears come off and the rear sight is retained when you install an optic. Why that's on there I'm not quite sure. It's interesting because although they have textured it, you can see there's some serrations there to be able to use it for racking, but it's just kind of an interesting extra they don't typically see. Coming around the right side of the gun, we can see we've got all of our controls on both sides of the gun, as I've already said. Next, we'll field strip this thing and take a look inside the 509 Midsize Tactical. Field stripping is fairly simple. Since we're going to be removing the barrel, well, of course, you're going to first check for clear, but we want to get that thread protector off. Otherwise, the barrel won't come out. There we go. Lock the slide to the rear. Rotate this lever downward. Bring the slide forward, pull the trigger, and the slide will come off. Taking a look inside of our frame, you can see we've got pretty much the standard setup that we're used to seeing in most modern polymer frame striker-fired guns. This locking block looks nice and beefy. I've also noticed that the rail thickness, the thickness of that part there, appears, maybe it's just the coloring, but it looks to be a bit thicker than normal. Not that that's an issue. I have yet to hear of a 9mm pistol breaking its rail there. I'm sure it happens, but I haven't seen it. But nice, simple construction in there. To get our barrel out of its slide, we're of course going to remove the recoil assembly. And you notice this yellow paint here, that's probably indicating a certain weight, meaning that they probably have other options. We've got a dual spring design that tends to make things easier to rack. It also, I think, helps control recoil by staging the deceleration of the slide. That's cool. Tap our barrel loose, bring it down at an angle so it can come out. And now we can take a look inside of our slide. There's our safety plunger. Very cleanly, nicely machined, and you notice that our striker spring is also color-coded in red. Makes me wonder what other options they have. This is an external extractor. Some people get upset about that, some people prefer that. I have yet to experience any real reason to care. Now I'll grab some match ammo and we'll check for chamber fitment. Chamber fitment, as we've been doing for years, is checked using some of this Nosler ammunition. Of all the ammo that I've tested over the years, most consistently, most precisely made and loaded, and they make their own brass, so I trust it. What we're looking at here is, well, first we got some nice chamfering around the edge there to help guide any errant rounds or hope with feeding, is when we drop this round in, do we get a nice plunk? Yes. Doesn't wiggle, it still can turn, and we're looking for how much of this brass is supported. So do we see any extension of brass beyond that shoulder there where it first bends? And we do not, which is excellent. A fully supported chamber not only helps with consistency by reducing the variable of how well the case expands, but also in the event of an overpressure or a failed casing, the failure is going to happen where the brass is least supported, and in guns that don't have that support, this will sit in here like this, that force comes out into your hand. So I prefer guns that have a fully supported chamber. Also nice to see a barrel like that on a gun set up for suppressor use, since you'll have slightly increased back pressure, and depending on the ammunition you're using, maybe putting the gun into a position where the timing of extraction, etc., is not quite where the gun or that ammo wanted it to be. It's one of the reasons why we don't test guns with suppressors on them, because we don't want to artificially alter the performance of the firearm for better or worse in our videos. Speaking of, when we get this thing to the range, you'll of course see our standard battery, which includes cold shots, full magazine +1. We'll do our trademark what's for dinner test, see what the gun eats. We'll try it on the spinner for sights and trigger control, which will be interesting with that very bright white front sight and this new trigger setup. Shoot some practical accuracy shots at 7 yards, and then give you our concluding thoughts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the range.